Developing tonight in the Middle East, tensions rising between the United States and Iran as we near the one-year mark of the killing of a top Iranian leader.
This week, Iran's president vowed to avenge the death of General Qasem Soleimani, calling his death an assassination, saying he holds President Trump and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo responsible for the killing. On January 3rd of this year, a U.S. airstrike killed Soleimani. For Iranians, he was a popular figure because of his opposition to the U.S. The U.S. spent decades pursuing him. The State Department says his operations within Iraq since 2003 killed more than 600 American personnel. Iran has repeatedly vowed to retaliate, and this week, the U.S. flew strategic bombers over the Persian Gulf for the second time this month, a show of force arguably meant to deter Iran from attacking American or allied targets in that region.
Adding to speculation that the U.S. is preparing for the possibility of an attack, President Trump cut short his holiday vacation, arriving back at the White House this morning. But to be clear, the administration did not give a reason for the president's early return. Joining us now to talk more about this situation is national security correspondent at WTOP Radio, JJ Green. He reports daily on international security, intelligence, foreign policy, terrorism, cyber developments across the world. He's also traveled to dozens of countries investigating, reporting, and analyzing the U.S. war against terrorism. JJ, always good to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us on this New Year's Eve. Let's begin with the fact that some U.S. officials are saying that we have a very real threat right now from Iran. What are you hearing from your sources, and what are your thoughts on the timing of these potential threats?
Hey, Marnie, it's good to be with you again. The U.S. is trying to send a message to Iran. U.S. Central Command, which runs U.S. military operations in the region, wants Iran to know that it can deploy an overwhelming combat force at any time on short notice anywhere in the world. And they want Iran to know that if they are thinking about any kind of attack on the U.S., that that's what they're going to have to contend with. There have been some discussions, at least in Iran, and we've heard some leaks about some information suggesting that they are looking for vulnerabilities in U.S. military outposts or infrastructure or places around the world where they could possibly launch attacks. They did, it's believed, launch an attack, rocket attack on the U.S. Embassy in Iraq last week, but they may be looking for more opportunities. And the U.S. military is trying to send them a message to say, if you do that, this is what you're going to have to deal with.
JJ, what do you make of the fact that, one, they're trying to show military force potentially with those B-52 bombers, but we also learned that they removed the U.S. Navy carrier that had been in the region for a while?
Well, a part of what's happening is resources have to be used judiciously, and they also have other places, other hotspots in the world that need the U.S. military's attention. What Iran is doing is nothing different from what they've done for decades, and that is to essentially pose a possible threat. But at the same time, it can also throw the U.S., if they commit all into just dealing with Iran, they may take their eye off the ball someplace else. So moving resources around is not unusual. Plus, the U.S. doesn't want to telegraph anything to anyone, the military, in Iran or beyond, in any adversarial country or location. So it's not clear why they're moving resources, but one thing I can tell you for sure, just knowing the way Central Command works, they've got a lot of resources and a lot of folks focused on exactly what they need to do with the possible threat from Iran and a possible retaliation.
What do you make of the fact that the president did return to the White House today? They're not saying it had anything to do with this potential threat from Iran, but he is back in Washington, D.C. Do you see that as an instance where this may be imminent? And also, what are you learning about any U.S. military options at this point, kind of posturing to be prepared?
Well, as far as the president returning to Washington, it's not clear why he returned to Washington. And as you mentioned, there could be some considerations given to this situation in Iran, and he has, as he's prone to do, tweeted within the last couple of days messages towards Iran about what may happen if they do anything. And I think that's probably because he's gotten wind of Iran talking about possibly Germany, also talking about some type of British company that they believe may have been involved in the assassination of Soleimani. So it's not clear whether or not the president is planning anything or not in terms of Iran, but I can tell you for sure what the U.S. is going to do with reference to Iran is what they've always done. They know that Iran deploys the best terrorist force in the world, hands down. They know that they can do things because they have proxies. Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis was one of the people that was killed along with Soleimani in January last year, and he ran one of the proxy organizations that is engaged with Hezbollah and other Iranian proxies in terrorism. The U.S. is keeping their eye on all of them and making sure that it doesn't miss a beat when it comes to, first, detecting some type of activity, and then secondly, finding, finishing, and fixing any kind of activity against the U.S.
JJ, before I let you go, just a couple seconds left here, but I'm wondering how the presidential transfer of power happening in D.C. impacts the strategy between relations with the U.S. and Iran.
Well, the next president, President-elect Biden, is going to have to deal with Iran's anger. But I think from what I'm hearing, Iran recognizes that he's got a different view on how to deal with Iran. Remember, he was a part of the Obama administration that extended, if you will, an olive branch to Iran to deal with that nuclear situation. Iran, I believe, is thinking that may be another opportunity for them. So their anger may be calmed a bit by President-elect Joe Biden getting into office. They are aware of that, and I'm not exactly sure what the Biden administration would be doing or planning, but I have to tell you, I'm pretty sure they're going to lean heavily on that goodwill that Biden sort of curried with them while he was a part of the Obama administration.
Certainly a situation we are all watching closely on this New Year's Eve. JJ Green, as always, appreciate your time. Have a safe and happy New Year yourself.